Let's talk about something we've probably all done. You cram for a big exam, you ace it, and then poof, a week later, it's like you never even learned it. It's a super common experience, right? But it actually points to a massive problem in how we're often taught to study. Today, we're going to break down why that whole cycle happens and why it's so broken. Okay, so let's start with a scene that's probably way too familiar for a lot of parents and teachers out there. You have a kid who seems to have the material down cold. They can recite the answers, they pass the test, but then the next day, it's gone. It's just vanished. And it leaves you wondering why? Why isn't any of this actually sticking? Well, to get to the bottom of this disappearing knowledge act, we have to name the main culprit. And its name is rote learning. So let's get really clear on what we mean when we say that. At its most basic, rote learning is just memorizing stuff by repeating it over and over and over again. Think flashcards, drills, that kind of thing. But here's the key phrase you need to remember: without being understood. The information gets lodged in short-term memory, sure, but it's not actually connected to anything meaningful. So in the real world, this looks like a student just memorizing facts, repeating the exact answers they were told, and then just spitting them back out when asked. It creates this illusion of learning that looks really convincing, but it's incredibly fragile. It's kind of like an actor who knows all their lines perfectly but has absolutely no idea what the play is actually about. And this is the trap, right? Because this method can work for that one upcoming test. It'll get the grade. But that short-term win comes at a huge long-term price because it completely fails at the most important job: building real, lasting knowledge. All right, so let's pull back the curtain and look at the psychology here. Why does this strategy fall apart so spectacularly in the long run? It's about more than just grades. It's about skills and, believe it or not, a student's confidence. Think of it this way. The knowledge never really sinks in. It just kind of floats on the surface of the mind. It's totally disconnected from other ideas, other subjects, or how things work in the real world. It's just an isolated little fact with nothing to hold on to. And that's where the real damage starts. It sets off this whole chain reaction. Because the concepts don't connect, those crucial thinking skills, problem solving, analyzing, they never get a chance to grow. That makes it almost impossible to apply what you've learned to a new problem. And after a while, that feeling of not being able to figure things out, it really, really erodes a student's confidence. And you can literally see this confidence gap play out over a student's school career. Look at this chart. In the early grades, when just memorizing stuff is often enough, confidence is sky high. But then you get to middle school, high school. The subjects get way more complex, and that old strategy just stops working. The student starts to feel like they're falling behind, and their confidence just tanks. And this isn't just some abstract idea. This is a super common experience. It explains why a kid who was a star student in third grade might suddenly hit a wall in middle school. The problem wasn't them. The problem was that their entire educational house was built on a foundation of sand, not solid understanding. So, if rote learning is the problem, what's the fix? Well, let's talk about the solution. It's all about making a shift, a big one, away from just memorizing and toward genuine understanding. This is how you build a foundation that actually lasts. I mean, the difference is it's night and day. On one side, you have that fragile, surface-level recall that completely crumbles under pressure and wrecks a student's confidence. But on the other hand, you have this really strong, deep-rooted approach that builds real retention, develops critical thinking, and actually boosts a kid's belief in their own abilities. And here's the beautiful part. These two things, retention and progress, they feed each other. When you actually retain what you learn, it feels meaningful. That feeling of competence builds the confidence you need to take on the next big challenge. It creates this amazing, positive, upward spiral of learning. Okay, so this learning for understanding idea sounds great in theory, but what does it actually look like? How do we do it, whether we're in a classroom or just sitting at the kitchen table helping with homework? It's really a four-step journey that flips the script from being a passive memorizer to an active learner. First, you have to truly understand the concept, not just the definition. Then, you have to ask questions. Encourage those why and how questions. Step 3 is crucial. You've got to apply those ideas to solve new problems. And finally, you make it stick by connecting it all back to real life. That makes it relevant, and that makes it unforgettable. And what this all comes down to is a huge emotional shift. Learning should feel like you're solving a puzzle, It should be a series of those awesome aha moments where things finally click. It should never, ever feel like a stressful, high-pressure chore. So this leaves us with a really big question, not just for teachers or parents, but for every single one of us. How do we want to learn? How do we make sure we're building a generation of thinkers, innovators, and creative problem solvers, and not just a generation of really good memorizers? Honestly, the future kind of depends on the answer.